Done.
Okay, so we'll be doing ortho today. Our basic agenda will be to know the foundation of ortho. So we'll know the basic anatomy, physiology, and the biochemistry of bones. That'll be our agenda. That's what we are trying to do today. Okay. So in the anatomy part, we need to know the structure of a bone. So in the bone, the outermost part will be the epiphysis, the weight-bearing part, and then you have the physis, which is also known as the growth plate. Okay, it's known as the growth plate. And then you have the metaphysis and diaphysis. So diaphysis is the central part of the bone. Then you have metaphysis is the most vascular region, and then physis is the growth plate and epiphysis. Okay. So in metaphysis, if you're looking at the structure of diaphysis, so you'll be having the central part, which is known as the medulla, and then you'll be having the cortex. Okay. So the central part is made up of spongy or cancellous bone. And then you have the cortex, this cortex part, which is made up of compact bone. So the region between the cortex and the medulla is lined by the endosteum. The special feature about endosteum is it is the most metabolically active layer. This is a recently asked MCQ, so I've written it in red. You can write it down if you want. And then you have the covering of the cortex, which is known as the periosteum. So in the periosteum itself, you're going to be having two layers. So you'll have the inner cambium layer, which is also an MCQ asked. So first I'll just explain it. So inner cambium layer, which produces callus. Okay, callus is basically the first sign of any fracture healing. So if there's a fracture, the first, if you want to see it in an X-ray, if it's a pathological fracture, if the patient has got osteoporosis or something like that, you want to be able to diagnose it. You're going to look for callus formation. Okay, so that's the first sign of fracture healing, which can easily be identified. So that's produced from the inner cambium layer, which is a part of what? It's a part of the periosteum. Okay, it's the innermost layer. Then you have the outer layer, which is the outer fibrous layer. So the layer which is going to be, okay, something happened. The layer which is going to be connecting the periosteum to the cortex is known as the Sharp's fiber. Okay, so this is basically this is the basic structure. So do you have any doubts till now?
Pratiksha?
Yeah.
Yeah, where is marrow? Okay, this is the most stupid question I can ask.
Okay. Nothing. Marrow is basically the spongy part of the bone, right? So that is present in the medulla.
So do you have like osteocytes there as well?
Yeah, you'll be having osteocytes everywhere in the bone.
Then what produces? Like, where are the cells? Like,
I'll get to that in more detail. So till now, whatever I've explained, if you've been able to understand, that should be enough for now. So this is the basic. We built up our concepts on this. Okay. You guys got it?
Yep. Okay.
So then, just a minute. Of each one of these. Okay, so if you're looking at epiphysis, there will be 4 different types of epiphysis again. So in these 4 different types, you have the pressure epiphysis, you'll have the traction epiphysis, atavistic epiphysis, and the aberrant epiphysis. Okay, so you'll have the pressure epiphysis, traction, atavistic, and aberrant epiphysis. So what is the pressure epiphysis? Pressure epiphysis is going to be anything which bears the basic pressure of the body, that is weight bearing. Weight bearing epiphysis are known as pressure epiphysis. So can you try to give me an example for this? Any weight bearing epiphysis that you can think of?
Femur.
Yeah, the head of the femur. Okay, so that's one classic example of this. Then in case of tractional epiphysis, that would be anything which has a lot of muscle attachments. So this tractional is basically, it means that it's subjected to a lot of stress. So one example, classic example of this would be the trochanters. Okay, my iPad is straight, so I'm not able to write properly. Then you have atavistic epiphysis. So atavistic is evolutionary epiphysis, okay, which was previously important but doesn't serve any purpose right now. The classic example for that would be the coracoid process of the scapula, which was initially really important, but later it's fused to the body of the scapula. It's just accessory. Then you have the aberrant epiphysis, which is an anomaly. It might be present in a few people, won't be present in a few others. So an example for this would be the head of the first metatarsal and the metacarpus. Why is this important to know? Because when you're looking at an X-ray, you should not confuse it to something else. So you'll have to know that a few percentage of people might have it, okay? Then the second layer, if you're talking about the second layer, that's the physis. Physis is you can call it a primary cartilaginous joint because it's made up of cartilage which gets converted into bones, okay? So this physis, for this I have a mnemonic, which is real people have career options. So real people have career options, just R, P, H, C, and O. So the first layer is the resting layer, okay? So you have the cells which are in a single layer, they're just resting. And then they get activated, they start proliferating, they become multiple layers. So they're multiplied here. Then you have hypertrophic layer, which is for the head there. Hypertrophic or maturation layer, which basically means they've enlarged in their size. So you also call it a maturation layer. They're maturing, right? Then you have the next layer, which is the calcified layer. So they're basically, calcium is getting accumulated here. Then afterwards, you have the next layer, which is the ossification zone. This is where phosphate also is going to get accumulated and forms calcium hydroxyapatite. And then you'll be having the metaphyseal blood vessels, which are going to come to this physis zone. Okay, so this is basically the structure of the physis that we are seeing here. And also one more thing you have to know, see, we all know this physis is a growth rate. So is that the bone just growing longitudinally? Why are they not growing laterally? They can as well grow laterally, because all it does is it's a growing layer. Is it not going laterally? That's also, for that we need to know about another structure which is known as the cartilage of Lecroy. So that basically originates from the metaphysis and goes up to the epiphysis. So what it's doing is it's going to prevent lateral growth of the bones, and it will cause only height-wise growth. That's why we become tall and we don't become stout, because of bone growth. Okay, so that's another interesting concept. Then we'll go to the next layer,
Can you repeat
metaphysis.
that
It's
part?
basically a very highly
cartilage
vascular. Okay, wait, I'll just write it down. Should be easier for you people. It's called the cartilage of Lecroy. So the spelling, hopefully it's correct. If it's wrong, I'll put it up on the group. This is known as the cartilage of Lecroy, which prevents the lateral growth of the bone, allows the bone to grow only height-wise. That's why we are tall and we don't become stout. Okay, and then we'll go to the metaphysis. Okay, guys. Again, I need assurance. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, the metaphysis is another highly vascularized structure. So it basically has just a lot of blood vessels, and the blood vessels here are called hairpin loop blood vessels, which means they're highly vascularized. They're in the form of a loop. They accumulate a lot of blood. So that's why since they have a lot of blood pooling, if there is a reduced blood supply, or there is some anything which causes venous constriction in bones, it's going to result in osteomyelitis, right? It's very easy for bacteria to go here and cause osteomyelitis. So that's another important feature. And about the diaphysis, already learned the structure of the diaphysis here, which has the medulla and it has the cortex. Okay, so this is the base on which we are going to be building up our next part, which is biochemistry of bones. In biochemistry, Sonika, I'm going to be explaining the cells and everything. So you will get to know the biochemical structure of the bone. So till Anat, it's clear?
Yes.
So next we'll be learning the biochemistry. So what is the functional unit in brain? In the nervous system, what is a functional unit?
Neurons.
Yeah, and what is the functional unit in the renal system? It's the nephrons. So similarly, in the skeletal system, it's going to be something known as the osteon. Okay, so it's going to be called the osteon. So if you're looking at osteon, it will further have two main parts, which is the organic part and the inorganic part. Okay, so organic part having two further divided into two parts, which will be the matrix, and it will have the cellular region. And then you have the inorganic part. So we'll be learning about the organic part now. Just a minute. Okay, so we'll be learning more about the organic part. Okay, so if you're in the organic part, just think this is the bone cellular structure. So you have a lot of matrix and you're going to be having cells. So we'll learn about the matrix now, then later we'll go to the cells. So in matrix, you have to know two main components. First one will be the proteoglycans and second one will be the proteins. So proteoglycans, glycans, aminoglycans, all these GAGs, etc. So that will be proteoglycans. Why is proteoglycan important? It's important for compressile strength of a bone. So if this is a bone, it's subjected to a lot of weight. That compressile structure, compressile strength of the bone will be by the proteoglycans. Okay, and then we'll go to the other proteins. So in proteins, you'll be having three main parts. So CP is the collagenous proteins, NCP is the non-collagenous proteins, and then you have the enzymes. So in collagenous proteins, you'll be having collagen. Okay, so what is the function of the collagen? It's important for the tensile strength, the pulling strength. So tensile strength is opposite of the compressile strength. So tensile strength is going to be outwards. Anything which is going to stretch the bone, put it under a lot of stress, that will be tensile strength taken care by the collagenous protein. And another important MCQ that they ask here is what type of collagen is abundant in the bone? Type 1 collagen. Why is this type 1 collagen? It will be very important for learning tomorrow's concept in osteogenesis imperfecta. We'll be looking into this type 1 collagen more because it will have various other skin manifestations, serial manifestations, etc. So keep this in your mind. And then in the non-collagenous proteins, there are three different types of non-collagenous proteins. You have osteocalcin, osteonectin, and osteopontin. Okay, so just know their names. We learn their functions later. And then you have enzymes. The main enzyme of the bone would be ALP, okay, alkaline phosphatase, very, very important enzyme. It's going to indicate an increase in the osteoblastic activity. Then, so we finished about the matrix. So next we are going to,
one doubt, alkaline phosphatase ideyalla,
ಹೇಳಿ. Yeah.
Gallbladder injuries indanu alkaline phosphatase baruttalla.
Yeah, sure. Alkaline
like,
phosphatase
is there a difference in the isoenzyme, like the enzyme difference idea?
No, alkaline is actually a generalized enzyme, okay? But if you're looking at a patient and his alkaline phosphatase levels are high, the next thing you'll do is you look for any hepatosplenomegaly or such. So if there is hepatosplenomegaly, you'll indicate other conditions, anything which is hepatic or splenic conditions, you'll be looking at it, okay? If it is just isolated ALP increase, an isolated ALP increase, you'll be looking at bone causes. So yeah, it is not specific, but it is an important indicator. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, then next we'll be going into these cells. So as we all know, three main types of cells in the bone. Sorry for my shabby handwriting. Next time I'll try to make it straight. I guess it's important not to write when you're sleepy. Okay, so we'll be looking at three main cells. One is the blast cells. One is the osteocytes, then osteoclast cells. So osteoblasts, if you're looking at it, they're basically bone producing cells, and they are important for the formation of osteon. Okay. Then you have osteocytes. Osteocytes are basically the grandparents in a bone. So osteoblasts are the young, hardworking people which are producing osteon. They're bringing wealth to the bone, and osteocytes just sits there. It's done its job. It's resting. And then osteoclasts are basically the children of the family. They're eating up all the produce that has been bought into the family, all the wealth. So these osteoclasts are eating up cells. Okay. So how do they eat up the bone? They do it for two main functions. First one is they resorb the bone, and also they help in remodeling the bone. They tell the bone, hey, don't go into a wrong way. This is not how you're supposed to grow. This is not how you're genetically meant to grow. You're supposed to grow like this. This is your prototype, and I'm going to make you grow this way only. So that's what osteoclasts do. Osteocytes are just sitting there, and osteoblasts, they help to produce osteon. So to know how osteoblasts help to produce osteon, I'll write it up straight so you can know better. So this is the osteoblast, okay? So what happens, osteoblast is going to produce osteoid. Then osteoid gets converted into osteon. Okay, so for this osteoid production, you need an enzyme. And enzyme is the one which is going to facilitate. So you'll need an enzyme, and that is ALP. Then you'll need raw products. What are the raw products? It will be collagenous proteins and non-collagenous proteins, okay? Then they produce the osteoid. Now what osteoid does? Osteoid is, you can say it's the immature type of a bone, very spongy bone. It has to become matured. So to become matured, it has to get calcified. So what are the substances which help in calcification? Basically calcium, and then you have phosphate. Calcium and phosphate gets accumulated in osteoid, and then it is going to be producing osteon. Okay, so that's how osteoblast will produce osteon. And what are the different types of MCQs that can be asked here? So they can ask about what cells are most abundantly present in bones. Okay, since we think osteoblasts are bone producing cells, it'll be our tendency to go and mark on osteoblasts. But then the basic answer would be osteocytes. Even though they are not metabolically active, they are resting cells, but the most number of cells will be present, will be the osteocytes. Okay, so this is the biochemistry part of it. I hope you guys got, no, one more part is the inorganic components of an osteon. So in the inorganic components, as I told you, it has to be calcium and phosphate, so which forms calcium hydroxyapatite. So this will be the biochemistry part. Then you have the physiology part. So physiology thing, you have to know serum calcium is very important. Okay, so the whole body is trying to maintain serum calcium's normal levels. Normal, what are the normal levels? Between 9 and 11. Between 9 and 11. So the body wants to maintain it, but then a lot of reasons, serum calcium levels will keep fluctuating. So you have to know, when calcitonin, what it does, it reduces the serum calcium levels. Okay, it reduces the serum calcium levels by reducing GI absorption, and also by increasing osteoblastic activity. That way it reduces serum calcium levels. And about parathormone, I have to explain it in detail. So yeah, where is calcitonin produced from?
Parafollicular cells of thyroid.
Yeah, absolutely right. Why is it important? Is because this question was asked in our it was asked in our externals, and most of us, they asked C cell carcinoma, medullary cell carcinoma of thyroid, which is not expected.
Paraneoplastic.
Yeah, but that's very, yeah, it's very important because it produces calcitonin. Okay, then you have parathormone functioning of this. Let's do it.
Even
so now what is happening in the body? Yeah.
Even amyloidosis, right?
Yeah. Okay. So basically what happens now, the body is having less serum calcium. In the blood, there's reduced serum calcium. Body has to do something. So it's going and signaling the parathyroid glands. Parathyroid glands, it's your duty to maintain the serum calcium levels. Please do something. So parathyroid is like, okay, what I can do, I can produce parathyroid. I can produce parathormone. And once I produce parathormone, now it will be parathormone's duty to increase the serum calcium levels. So what does it do? First, it goes to the GIT, okay? It goes to the GIT. It tells GIT, please reabsorb the calcium. You're wasting a lot of calcium. Your blood is not having enough calcium. I need calcium. So what GIT does, it also puts up an ultimatum to parathormone. It says, okay, I'll help you absorb calcium, but then you also get this 112 dihydroxy vitamin D. You get it. Calcitriol. Only when you get calcitriol, I'll help you absorb calcium. So that is one way in which GI absorption is increased. Okay, so parathormone has gone to GIT. It's told, please absorb calcium. So what GIT told, you get this dihydroxy calcitriol. I'll help you absorb it. So it went and got calcitriol. Calcium is absorbed, done. But still serum calcium level continues to be low. So the next system it goes to will be the renal tubular system, renal system. So it goes to the kidneys. It tells, do something, try to reabsorb a lot of calcium and help me maintain the serum calcium levels high. So what the kidneys do, they tell, okay, in the tubules I can reabsorb the calcium, but for that you have to exchange it with phosphate. Okay, so you have to exchange it with phosphate. So what happens is it goes to the tubule, absorbs up calcium and excretes phosphate. So you'll have to know there will be phosphaturia. So this is another important MCQ asked. What will be the urinary changes when parathormone is acting? Okay. Then, okay, renal system also done. Serum calcium has come up. Maybe it's 7, it's not yet 9 to 11. It wants to maintain it in that range. What does it do? It goes to the bone. It tells the bone, please reabsorb, please release, break down the osteon and release a lot of calcium. I need it in the serum. So what the bone does, okay. Now what parathormone does is, it can't stimulate the osteoclast directly, okay? So that's one disadvantage of the parathormone. It goes to the osteoblast. It's going to the osteoblast. It tells the osteoblast, please stop producing cells, release a lot of calcium, I need it in the blood. But then osteoblast tells, no, my function is basically to produce osteon. Okay, I can't cause breakdown of osteon. My duty is to produce osteon. So what it does, okay, fine, I'll help you with something. I'll produce rank ligand. It is my secondary messenger. Now rank ligand has become the secondary messenger. So rank ligand is produced. Rank ligand goes and acts on the osteoclast, and osteoclast activity will increase, bone resorption will increase. Okay. So this is the mechanism. That's why parathormone mechanism is kind of confusing, because most people, when an MCQ is asked, parathormone receptors are present on what cells, people tend to answer osteoclasts. But then it's not osteoclast, parathormone receptors are present on osteoblasts. But they might ask, rank ligand receptors are present where? It's present on the osteoclast. So this part you have to know, and it's end of the session. Thank you so much for listening.
Pratiksha.
Yeah.
Hello. Can you explain the phosphate levels alteration? The phosphate levels alter agadi yavaglu confuse